September 30th, 2011. And would you tell us your full name?
I'm Catherine Elizabeth Nobles Sinnott. Put in my maiden name.
Great. And where and when were you born?
I was born in Albany Hospital in Berkeley, California.
Oh. And it's a long way from Sonoma is the only reason
Well, the reason I was born there because we lived way back in the hills, and my mother wanted to be near a hospital. In a hospital, not near a hospital.
Yeah. So tell where you were, where you lived, a little bit about what you were saying about the sheep ranch. And,
the first ranch was way back in Sonoma County, and very bad dirt roads all the way. So by the time I was born, shortly after I was born, my mother said my older sister was 9 years old, and she said that we had to move out to the highway. So we moved out to South Mendocino County in a place called Yorkville. You can't call it a town because it just has a store and a post office, and then it has some houses. I think maybe there are 200 people there by now. On the way to Boonville. Some people have heard of Boonville, between Boonville and Cloverdale, California, and I lived there until I was 13. My father passed away. He died of pneumonia, and my mother was a teacher, so that we could be, she could teach and make money, because ladies in those days, this was 1936. And we moved out of that house, and it was a 14-room house. We moved from a 14-room house to a 3-room cabin that had no bathroom. We had 2 bathrooms in our other house. So that was unusual in that area. Most people didn't have bathrooms at all in those days, 1930s. Then I don't know how much you want to go into this, because we're supposed to be talking about Lafayette.
Right.
I moved between that house, my original 14-room house, I moved 23 times, and in 1956 I moved to Lafayette with my husband and 3 children. The youngest daughter had just been born, and I had 2 more children after that. The third child, I had 2 more children after that. I have pictures that I can show you of the house when it was very, very new, when the trees were tiny or no trees at all. This area up here had been up to a few houses below where I live. There had been pear orchards and no houses at all. And where I live, there was just a hillside where I live now. They've guaranteed us when we moved in here there would never be any houses above us, because the hills were so subject to slides, and they've been really bad. Our house has been fine, but they eventually did move houses, and so of course you're familiar with that right now. So my husband was taught at the University of California, and he formed a ride pool with 4 other men, I believe, from this area, and because we had only 1 car in those days, and so each wife could have the car for 1 day for her own. Except for 1 day when he had to drive. So it seemed much more primitive, and we liked it that way. We fought for no sidewalks and no lights, and we liked the idea that street lights. We like the idea that there is, it's very quiet. You can hear the birds, you can hear the cows, and of course now we have multitudes of turkeys. And the coyotes occasionally you can hear in the hills. Of course, I'm from a sheep ranch, and the 18,000 acres was mainly sheep, 7,000 sheep, and you can't have sheep and coyotes. But we don't have sheep here, so we can have coyotes, I guess. Where would you like me to go from here?
I'd like to know kind of where you and your husband were, and why you decided on this particular place. What brought you out here? How'd you find out about it?
After I graduated from UC Davis, I got a job. My first job was with the Western Regional Research Laboratory in Albany, California, right across from Golden Gate Field. So I was doing I was doing food research with a person who lived in this neighborhood, and we came out to visit them a few times, and she encouraged me to come out, and I liked the idea. Being brought up in such a extremely rural, I lived in the city of Berkeley for many years, and I didn't as an adult, and I really never quite adjusted to the city life. I like it much better out here.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. How many houses were here at that time when you came to visit your friend?
Well, I think the original bunch of houses was about 200. I'm not sure, but then they built more houses above us, and so I'm not exactly sure, but it was in the high 180s or 200, and they built, I don't know, maybe, I don't think as many as a dozen more since I've lived here, but they happen to be right across the street from me, so. Well, they've guaranteed, as I said, that there wouldn't be any more houses above, but there are now, and sitting up there quite well, so. We've enjoyed it here. It's a nice place to have children, because so many people in the suburbs have to have play dates for their children, and were plenty of children that my children enjoyed, and you could ride your bicycle or walk to any house. And some of my, especially my youngest child, and well, a couple of my children who are adults long since, are still in touch with those early childhood friends.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah.
My youngest daughter just had her 2 babies christened in Boston area. I guess it was on the Cape, actually, in Massachusetts. And her friend from Betty Lane, which is 3 streets over, attended her christening, and she now lives in Texas.
That's really neat. Yeah. So what do you sort of remember most about Lafayette when you first came here?
Well, I remember it was very quiet. I walked up above my house, and there was a man about 4 houses away that I could see sweeping, and I could hear his broom sweeping. And I couldn't believe it, because in the city, there's always enough noise so that you can't hear little things like that. And I remember that being a surprise. I guess I was surprised too that we all were sort of moving. I moved in a year and a half after this house was built, but most of the people everybody was new within reason, and they had coffee clutches, and lots of the ladies got together and were, with the children, sometimes without the children, but they enjoyed each other's, because we were a long way from everybody else, so we got well acquainted with our neighbors. Now I hardly know my neighbors because they've moved many, many times since I've been here for 55 years, I guess. You can imagine I've lost quite a few neighbors.
Yeah, a lot of turnover, I'm sure, in that time. How about the town of Lafayette?
The town of Lafayette looked like many American towns where you drive to, and there are little individual businesses, not the large mass-produced it was a very long time before we even had a McDonald's. So there was one hamburger place called Chaps, and nothing else where you could buy a hamburger. So it was very much less, but it hasn't grown so much. I mean, as compared to Pleasant Hill or San Ramon or Danville or any of those towns, it's pretty much kept it within reason. It's been gentrified, and as my children would say, been yuppied up. There's fancy this and fancy that. There wasn't much of any fancy anything. I think, as I remember, Moraga Road and the main street, Mount Diablo Boulevard, had 3 had three service stations on the corners.
There were lots of service stations.
And now they're quite, there's, I guess there's not a one on that corner at least. But, little tiny drugstores with sandwich bars, where you could get a sandwich or a milkshake or something like that. Things like that you'd see in the 1930s or 40s. So it was quaint and it was kind of plain. Mm-hmm. Whereas we're not very plain anymore.
Sure. So this neighborhood and the town basically were much smaller, because you mentioned all the pear orchards and all the. Mm-hmm. So the development has really.
Yeah, the neighborhood that you know as Burton Valley, across the St. Mary's Road from us, was all walnut and pear orchards, and there were little shacks for the migrant workers down there just beyond where the school is, the Burton Valley School. Mm-hmm. And there were and little outhouses for there were some horse ranches around that there still are horse ranches around actually over there, but I'm just trying to think. The school that's over there now, the Burton Valley School, is an elementary school, and it was, in those days, it was a junior high. And my older children went, our children, because we spread our children out so much, 18 years between the first and the last, that we had children in Burton School longer than any other person. And we got the T-shirt at the picnic when we had the last get together for the Burton School people. And one of the ladies is still mad at me. She was talking, I'm in a senior exercise class with her right now, and she's still mad at me. She says, because I spent 2 years in American Samoa in the mid 1960s, and they still counted. They didn't count that I was gone for 2 years. We were gone for 2 years.
And you would have tied with her, or she would have won?
Yeah, she would have beaten us, and she's still rankling about that.
Interesting.
So,
yeah. So, would you consider yourself sort of part of the influx, the kind of post-war influx of people to this area?
Yeah, it was still, World War II was still fresh in our minds in 1956. It was not like the wars that we have now. We got in and made up our mind what we were going to do, and we did it, and we lost hundreds and thousands of people doing it, but we did it, and now we just fritter away all our troops, according to me. 120 countries I think we're in now. I can't believe it. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the people all came back, and they all got GI Bills, and they all went back to school. Not all, but a great number, and they built a number of houses throughout the United States for this, and They were very inexpensive. We paid $14,500 for our house in 1956, and now I've built on, and so I have 3 bathrooms and five bedrooms. Even it's still certainly not a palatial home. It's taken care of us very well.
What did it start out as? 3 bedrooms, or?
Mm-hmm. 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and everything. The bedrooms were small. They still are small. You want to turn that off a minute?
Sure.
I have to get a. One of the changes that has been changed many, many years. So we moved here in 1956, and it was early 1958. Or late 57, it wasn't very long, a year or maybe a year and a half after we moved in, the railroad was moved, because there was a train that went from Oakland to Sacramento, and I don't know where else, but anyway, it was called the Sacramento Northern, and it was still going when we were here. During meantime, they had planned to put a huge freeway from Oakland to Pleasant Hill Road, where Pleasant Hill meets the freeway. And someplace along the line, thank God, they ran out of money and decided that was a bad idea because it would have changed our landscape tremendously.
Where were they going to put the freeway?
From,
not where 24 is, but
they were going to start it at Pleasant Hill Road, where Pleasant Hill meets the freeway.
Okay.
And they were going to come straight across, right by Burton School, and go on by St. Mary's College, and then go on like through Canyon, and up in and meet Skyline. You know, there's and go into Oakland.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know about that.
And so that we were kind of in fear of that for quite a while, that they would run this freeway, which would turn this not into an agrarian, more country feeling neighborhood. It would be just like San Ramon, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to live in San Ramon.
No. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And so, did you ever use the train when it was running?
No, it was just for freight.
It was just freight at that time.
It used to be passenger, and people used to come out from Oakland to St. Mary's College. You could you could commute to your college, or you could, come out for occasions that they had at the college and so on. So it was more closely related to Oakland. It had a more urban feeling for a country school, but it has an urban feeling now. I mean, as I say, the neighborhood would be extremely different if there was a huge freeway that went through. So
no doubt.
We're very grateful that it didn't.
What do you miss most about the way Lafayette used to be?
Well, of course I miss the fact that we knew each other, and and I think one of the things is when you have young children, you meet people throughout the neighborhood because of the children.
Yeah.
And of course I haven't had young children for a long time. My youngest daughter is in her early 40s, and she has two children under 2. So, as I say, my oldest daughter is right now in the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, visiting her. Well, they're visiting the country, and they have a relative over there also. But she's 61, and so that's quite a stretch with children. So I through the years, I knew many of my friends are 20 years younger than I am because I had a child 20 years older and 20 years younger. Roughly it's 18, but it's almost.
Yeah. And what do you hope for Lafayette's future? How do you see it progressing?
Well, I guess, it sounds like a fuddy-duddy probably, but I really like it the way it is, and I hope it can stay more rural, because it seems like it's an important thing to have a break between a large city like Oakland, Berkeley, and then going on to Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill, and those cities that are getting pretty big now. It's nice to have a break in between, and so it's not just straight urbanized all the way through, because you can drive through Lafayette on the freeway and you hardly know you've gone through a town. If you don't look quickly, you don't know which tree to look around to see if you can see anything. So the folksiness, having grown up in a very rural area, I like the idea of being able to know people. I do know a great many people, and I have a lot of friends, and I take part in a lot of activities which are available to me because there's an awful lot of a lot of people with a lot of talent in this neighborhood, in this town, that it makes it very stimulating to live here as a person that's lived here this long. I've really enjoyed. I worked for many years in Walnut Creek, and I really knew Walnut Creek sometimes better than I knew. I know this neighborhood, and I know how to get to my job. And so but my home and my neighbors were very important to me here, as my job was very important to me. But I didn't know as much about streets. I still don't know much about the streets in Lafayette, you know.
It's spread out
It's
more
spread
than
out.
I imagine
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
What job did you do?
I was a home economist for the Berkeley Co-op. The Berkeley Co-op started in the mid-30s in Berkeley. It's a cooperative grocery store. There was only one on University Avenue, and it was a consumer-owned store and a really very much consumer-oriented, so that they gave a lot of information, so they weren't just selling, and they were just pointing out. One of our jobs was to point out ways to live in your food area of your life as economically and as healthfully as possible without spending too much money, of course. And of course that is not a good way to run a business because you're supposed to be making money, for crying out loud, you know. And so people stuck with us a long time because it was almost like a religion. I mean, people loved it. But finally the big supers came in and we couldn't compete anymore.
And then I think the culture shifted, that more people were interested in what you're saying, the healthful living and so forth, than had been when the co-op was the only game in town for that.
Well, probably, but you know, you go into a grocery store and most of the stuff I wouldn't buy because the whole middle of the store is processed food. And I will just walk around the side of the, you know, the fruits and vegetables and the meats and
dairy
and that kind of thing that are not overly processed, or, you know, they come right out of the field. I think we have a lot of sickness in this country because they're eating trash. Much trash.
I think that's true, yeah.
And at 87, I'm pretty darn healthy.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, so is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I'll probably think of it later, but I have some pictures I'll show you later.
I would definitely like to see those. Yes. Well, thank you so much, and I'll just end that here.